Hello, Jonathan Peters here with another edition of Big Heads, Big Ideas. All right. So today is National Tell a Story Day. So this is the day to tell stories. And it's important to understand that stories are important to how we learn. So not only how we learn, how we retain what we've learned, and also how we take what we've learned and apply it to different aspects of our lives. And so to demonstrate this capacity and why this is important to our brains, I want to start with this image. This is a representation of the American football field. All right. So if we start all the way over here at 100,000 years ago, now, we know that we had the capacity for language 100,000 years ago. We can study this. This is when we started to form societies and groups and so on. So where we don't know is how much before that did we have the capacity for language, because all humans have the ability for language. So many argue that, well, we must have had the capacity 1.6 million years ago, but before the Great Migration out of Africa. So others have argued, and when we start looking at genes and the genes for capacity of language, there's a certain pair of these genes that we have that other animals don't have. And the argument is that perhaps this new development was so successful that humans quickly adapted it through the process of evolution. So regardless of when we had it, we know we had language 100,000 years ago. So the reason I'm using this, we start all the way down here on the goal line, and we come all the way through here, all the yards after yards after yards. The first written language doesn't come till 3600 BCE. So up until then, we had no way of tracking, preserving information. So the Sumerian and the Egyptian cuneiforms first, and so these folks, and then later the Chinese, had a certain advantage because the first alphabet doesn't come along until 1800 BCE. So again, almost 2,000 years advantage here. And then with the alphabets, and then different languages adopted, use the alphabet to adopt. And then it wasn't until, by the way, this is all the way down on this, inside the 6-yard line is when the cuneiforms came through. And then on the 4th yard line is when the first alphabet comes along. Then it's not until 1436 that we finally get the Gutenberg press. And this is when things began to change when it became to learning, because before that, we could not have standardized tests. Before that, we didn't have bullet points. We certainly didn't have things like PowerPoints and so on, like you're seeing on the screen now. So this is all very, very new to us. This is on the half-yard line is when the Gutenberg press was. So what's happened is we've done the touchdown, and they're reviewing the play to look at when the knee came down. Shoot, the knee hit the ground at the half-yard line before they got the ball across the goal line. And so now we have to come back on the field and play that final half yard. So when we think about how new literacy is to the human species, we start to ask the question, from this whole football field, from the goal line all the way down to the 6-yard line, how was information preserved and passed on from generation to generation to generation? And it turns out it's through story. This is how the brain is set up for story. So I want to share with you, as an example, and for Tell a Story Day, I am going to tell a story about my trip to Australia. So I'm based in the United States, and I was working with this company delivering their programs, their seminars, and they sent me to Australia for 3.5 weeks of public seminars. And for those of you who haven't been to Australia, the continent is roughly the size of the United States. And so the tour started all the way down here in Tasmania, and specifically Hobart. And we went from there up to Melbourne, and then a few places around here up to Adelaide, Canberra, and then came across here, Canberra, and then Sydney, went up the Gold Coast, went up here all the way to the top to Darwin, and then down here to Perth. And that's where the public seminar tours ended. But what was cool about this opportunity is before the tour started. And after the tour started, I got to go into companies and do what's called on-site training. So a couple days of training. So afterwards, that from Perth came back over here to wine country and the Blue Mountains. And it's a gorgeous, gorgeous area. But before all of this started, they flew me to Darwin up here at the north, and down here is this little town called Catherine. So right here at this junction here of these freeways, Catherine, extremely small town. So while I was traveling around all the other places, they usually had a driver for me because they drive on a different side of the road than we do in the United States. But there was no driver here in Darwin, so I got to rent a car. As soon as the Hertz rental car opened, I was there to rent my car, and they told me that I had to be off this stretch of road by dusk. And so, in fact, the car would turn off at dusk if I was not at my location. And so they warned me about this. So I was exploring all through here. And the reason for this this thing with their car is that that's part of the world. The kangaroo and the water buffalo at night come and lay down on the road, and you don't really see them, especially moving as fast as this road is. And the water buffalo would have a much better time than this little Ford that I had. So same thing. After delivering 2 days of training here, I need to get the car back to Darwin. And so I get up at dawn, and I drive. The road's not here on the map, but there's a road that goes up here, and Kurdu National Park is right here. And so that's where I wanted to explore. And so I was running around, exploring, seeing as much as I can. I'm standing on a rock over here, and I'm looking across at this rock face over this rock outcropping. I say, oh, that's interesting. So I climb down off the ridge that I'm on and go running around to the end here. And I come around to the corner of the rock, and I see this. And I instantly knew this story. This is an origin story that these creatures up here gave birth to this creature who gave birth to humanity. Now, this was a story told over 20,000 years ago by folks who spoke a language that I don't speak, and a language that probably no longer exists. And yet their story, I understood their origin story. But that's not why I'm telling you this story today on Tell a Story Day. The reason is because of how the brain works. And I want to demonstrate this. So if you have not been to Australia before, your brain, you have nothing to connect with. But because I'm telling you a story, your brain finds things in your memory and your experiences that relate. So it's a way of engaging the brain while I'm telling the story. So when I said it's like the United States, if you've been to the United States, you say, oh yeah, now you get a sense of it, especially if you've been either coast, you get a sense of it. And so your brain's like, oh yeah, so this would be like Florida or Texas down here. This would be the East Coast. Up here would be the Twin Cities or something, and Perth, I don't know, it'd be Southern California. So your brain starts making those connections. Now, if you have been to Australia, you might not have been to Catherine or Kurdu National Park, but you've been to national parks. And so when I showed that picture with the outcroppings, your brain was looking for something, a similar experience. And same thing, you did not see those. You probably, if you've been to Kurdu, you might not have seen those petroglyphs because they weren't out by the parking lot, but you may have seen petroglyphs live, or certainly seen pictures of them. And so your brain was constantly working. So this is one of the aspects of story. It's a way of engaging people in the information that we're having. So again, for you, with your learners, if you put the learning inside of a story, their brains will engage. Now, this is just one aspect of story. Down in the comments, I have a link to the blog that I just recently wrote about other reasons why story is so important to our brains and so important to our thinking. So yes, I do start the blog with this story with a couple paragraphs, but if you would skip down and start seeing other aspects of why story is very, very important to learning. So our brains learn better with it, we remember better with it, and then we take the learning and apply it more likely through story. So again, Jonathan Peters, Big Heads, Big Ideas. That's my email on the screen. I would love to hear from you, get some insights from you in this discussion of narrative. And again, like I said, if you click in the comments below, you'll see a link to a blog that gives other aspects of why story is important to our learning.